February 1959. 9 experienced hikers set up camp on a mountain slope deep in the Ural wilderness. That same night, they cut open their own tent from the inside with knives and ran out into temperatures of nearly 30 below zero. Some of them almost undressed, some of them barefoot. All 9 died. The official investigation at the time concluded that a mysterious, compelling natural force was responsible and never managed to explain what that force actually was. More than 65 years later, even with all our modern technology, there still isn't a final answer. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident, one of the most debated mysteries of the 20th century. Today, we're looking at what happened that night, the theories that piled up over 65 years, and why even a recent scientific explanation still hasn't fully closed the case. The group was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, a student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute. With him were 8 companions, all experienced skiers and hikers, well prepared for harsh conditions. Their goal was a difficult ski route through the northern Ural Mountains toward the peak of Mount Otorten. The trek was rated at the highest difficulty category of its time, a challenge only experienced, well-trained groups could attempt. On February 1st, the group set up camp on the slope of a mountain the local Mansi people called Kholat Syakhl, a name that roughly translates to Dead Mountain, a name that, long before the tragedy, already carried a grim meaning. When the group failed to check in by the expected date, a search began. It wasn't until February 26th that rescuers finally found the camp. What they found immediately felt wrong. The tent had been cut open, not from the outside, but from the inside. Someone inside that tent, in pitch darkness and brutal cold, had sliced it open with a knife and climbed out, instead of simply using the entrance. Around the tent there were footprints, a trail leading down the slope toward the forest. Some of the prints belonged to people wearing socks, some belonged to people wearing only one shoe, some were completely bare feet. Near the edge of the forest, about a mile from the tent, searchers found the first 2 bodies. Both were nearly undressed, wearing only their underwear, despite the brutal cold. At first glance, this looked like a classic case of death by hypothermia, panic, disorientation, and, at some point, a freezing person, as sometimes happens with hypothermia, begins tearing off their own clothes, overwhelmed by a false sensation of heat. But the more bodies that were recovered over the following weeks, the less that simple explanation seemed to fit. Some of the victims had suffered severe chest and skull injuries, trauma comparable in force to a car crash. And yet there was almost no external damage to the skin around those injuries, no bruising or cuts of the kind you'd expect from an impact that powerful. 2 of the victims were found without their eyes. One of the women in the group was missing her tongue. Clothing belonging to several members of the group tested positive for unusually high levels of radioactivity. Each of these details on its own might have had a simple explanation, but taken together, they formed a picture that stubbornly refused to add up into one coherent story. There's one more unsettling piece to this story. Another group of hikers, camped roughly 30 miles away that same night, later independently described a strange phenomenon in the sky, glowing orange spheres slowly moving over the mountains. No official explanation for that sighting was ever offered. Over 65 years, the list of theories proposed to explain the tragedy grew to almost absurd proportions. An avalanche. A powerful, nearly inaudible infrasound caused by the local terrain, capable of triggering panic attacks and physical illness in people nearby. A Yeti attack, a collision with secret Soviet military testing, possibly a failed ballistic missile launch. Even theories involving intelligence agency cover-ups and UFOs. Every single theory explained some of the details of the tragedy and immediately ran into other details it simply couldn't account for. There's one especially unsettling detail in this story. Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator on the case in 1959, decades later, in 1990, publicly admitted that he had been ordered to close the investigation and classify the case files. He himself, by his own account, believed the glowing spheres in the sky that night were somehow connected to the group's deaths, though that was never officially confirmed. More than 60 years after the tragedy, a team of Swiss researchers proposed a detailed physical model of what might have happened based on modern computer simulation. Their hypothesis? A combination of factors: the unusual shape of the terrain, the fact that the hikers themselves had cut a flat platform into the slope to pitch their tent, and strong sideways wind gradually building up snow, could have triggered what's known as a slab avalanche. Not a classic avalanche in the way most people picture one, but a localized, still powerful release of a dense layer of snow, capable of causing exactly the kind of severe, not immediately fatal chest and skull injuries that were recorded in the autopsies. For the first time, this model offered a plausible explanation for why the hikers cut their way out of the tent in a panic instead of simply using the entrance, and why they retreated into the forest, seeking shelter from continuing danger on the open slope. It would seem like the mystery was finally solved 62 years later. But even one of the authors of that very study, when asked by journalists, admitted that the truth is, nobody really knows for certain what happened that night. The model explains some of the anomalies, but not all of them. It says nothing about the glowing orange spheres. It doesn't fully account for the missing eyes and tongue. And in 2019, relatives of the victims, through a lawyer, once again publicly demanded that the case be reopened, still unsatisfied by any single official explanation after 6 decades. Maybe the most unsettling part of this whole story isn't the exact cause of death. It's the fact that more than 65 years later, with every modern scientific method available, humanity still can't say with complete certainty what made 9 experienced, well-trained hikers panic, cut open their own tent, and run half-naked into the night at nearly 30 below zero. If you enjoyed this journey into one of the most debated mysteries of the 20th century, subscribe. There are many more topics like this coming. And let me know in the comments, which mystery should I dig into next?